Okay, in that case, we'll call to order this meeting of the California Unemployment Insurance Appeals Board for Wednesday, September 22nd, 2021. We'll begin with a roll call vote. The chair is present. Vice Chair Reeves is not present at this point, but we'll add him in when he arrives. Member Eng.
Present.
Member Allen.
Present.
Member Ken Monning.
Present.
Okay, please show that all but Member Reeves are present at the time of the roll call. I want to say to those watching, I want to welcome you first of all. This is a Zoom meeting and members and staff are at various places around the state. The chair is broadcasting from San Diego. In addition, I do want to say if you look at the agenda, there is no closed session today. So at the conclusion of item number 9, we will move directly to adjournment. With that, we move to approval of the minutes from our August 18th meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
So move.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we adopt the minutes of August 18, 2021. We'll do a roll call vote. Member Reeves is there. Okay, we'll hold up on the vote then. Hello, Dan, and welcome.
I apologize.
No, we all have those kinds of issues. Goes with the territory. We did already do our roll call, so let the roll call now be amended to show that Member Reeves is in attendance. And we were just about to vote on the minutes, Dan. So there's a motion and a second to approve the minutes. The chair vote, this is from the August 18th meeting. The chair votes aye. Vice Chair Reeves.
Aye.
Member Eng.
Aye.
Member Allen.
Aye.
Member Ken Monning.
Aye.
Okay, please show the minutes from August 18, 2021 being adopted unanimously. Okay, we now move to the chair's report, item number 3. Just one report, and I want to thank Jody Remke for always keeping track of this for me. We have again, as a board, heard and resolved over 500 higher level appeals this month. Again, for those watching, what you see here at the board meeting is just kind of the tip of the iceberg of the work these board members do. They have been very busy this month, as they always seem to be. So thank you to my colleagues on the board for your work on those cases. Second announcement, I want to thank Andrea Miles, an ALJ, and Aida Zavala from our executive office for taking the lead on our Promise charity campaign for this year. The kickoff is going to be next Wednesday, and you will all be receiving, all who are employees of CUIAB will be receiving information on the kickoff sometime this week. But thank you again. It's a lot of work, and Judge Miles and Aida Zavala, thank you both so much for the work you're doing on that. My last announcement, I had mentioned over the summer that I had been nominated to be president-elect of, nominated to be on the board of NAWIA, the National Association of Unemployment Insurance Appeals Professionals. That is our national organization for folks who do what we do and what all of our employees do in all 50 states. Well, showing a manpower shortage, I've now been nominated to be the president-elect of NAWIAP and have in fact begun that role. And I will become president on July 1st. So I'll be president now from July 1st of 22 until July 1st of 23. And I'll be counting on my colleagues on the board and others on staff for support in that role. NAWIA puts on a major conference every year, puts on several webinars during the year, does a newsletter. So Michael and Laura will look to you. And various other things during the year. They keep a pretty robust website as well. So I'll probably need some help from Jefferson. So again, that role will start on July 1st. Until then, I am president-elect. That concludes the chair's report. Now we move to item number 4, the board members report, beginning with Vice Chair Reeves.
Don't have a report. I would like to congratulate you on your appointment. Did you say the appointment starts on July 1st
July 1st, that's
Okay.
correct,
of this year?
of this year. Well, of 2022.
Oh, 22. So you will be serving as president-elect until then?
That's correct.
Okay, okay. Well, congratulations. I look forward to the conferences and the webinars.
Thank you, Dan.
It will be top-notch.
And it will also help us hopefully get a good gauge on what others around the country are doing that we can borrow from and that we can compare ourselves to. Anything else, Dan?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to Member Eng.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to echo Mr. Vice Chair Reeves. Congratulations to you. You're an exemplary leader for CUIAB locally and now for our national organization. And I thank you for your accepting of the additional responsibility, which I'm sure will be quite significant as the conferences come up. I wanted to just make a brief comment about the milestone that we've reached. And that milestone is that now that the federal pandemic programs such as PUA, PEUC, PAC, FPUC, and MEUC are ending this month. And although we know that we'll still see residual cases in the pipeline, I think we've reached this milestone with a great deal of help from our CUIAB leadership, especially Chief Kutri and the team assembled here today and perhaps not present on the video, as well as our staff. And I'm reminded that when those cases hit us, we had, they were unprecedented. We had trainings, we had materials, numerous questions on the discussion page, voicemail messages that I'm sure many of you received that perhaps they didn't know where to turn, and we of course referred them to our staff. And now the transition back to pre-pandemic cases where we'll be probably seeing more of the separation cases again. I really want to express my personal appreciation, knowing that we couldn't have done it without all of the assistance that we've received. Our staff, the people represented here, the FOALJs who had to pivot, the appellate judges as well, with questions that had no, as far as I know, no precedent decisions. And at a time where reading a lot of and hearing the testimony was quite heartbreaking, knowing the suffering that has gone on because of the pandemic. So I just wanted to thank all of us. And like I said, I know that we'll still be seeing residual cases, but I do think that this is a milestone that perhaps we didn't think would ever arrive. So just wanted to thank everybody for that.
Thank you, Mike.
No
I'm
further
sure the
comments,
rest of the
Mr.
board-
Chair.
Thank you, Mike. I'm sure the rest of the board seconds your thanks to our entire staff and organization for the hard work they've done in light of the unprecedented issues we've been dealing with. Moving on now to Member Allen.
Thank you, Chair Block. I think it goes without saying at every meeting, we recognize what a great job all the levels of our organization does, the support staff, our judges, the management team, IT. And Chair Block, I want to let you know that if there is an opposition audit to your presidency, I will be there in support of you. So, so because I know you'll do a fantastic job. And the other thing I'd just like to mention is a point of personal privilege. I've been a little bit melancholy the last few days of hearing about the fact that we've now gone, there's an estimate of now over 765,000 deaths in this country from COVID. And then I started thinking worldwide about how many millions of brothers and sisters, mothers, fathers, children have died in this epidemic. And I would very much ask, as a point of personal privilege, when we adjourn today, we have maybe a minute of silence before we adjourn, because you know, the one thought I did have, and it's from Mother Jones. Mother Jones said, "Mourn for the dead and fight like hell for the living." And we're here every day fighting to do what we can to process these cases, adjudicate them fairly. And our work, the work of the unemployment system, ours on appeal, we are a shock absorber for society and for families and for businesses and for the economy. We were designed that way by FDR during the Great Depression.
At least on my computer, looks like Michael is frozen.
Frozen?
He wasn't frozen for the rest of you? Huh, okay, well, you have to tell me later what you said, Michael.
I was spending 5 minutes praising you, Marty. You missed it, but no, seriously, you have done a wonderful job. So I've talked more than long enough, but I would ask that we just spend a minute when we do adjourn today, because to me, this has been mentioned in other board meetings. We're in a marathon. This is not a sprint, and I think everybody has performed incredibly well. But I'd be remiss in just saying it's such a difficult time for everyone, and I just feel very strongly that we just need to at least acknowledge so much pain and suffering that's happened in this last year and a half. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. We will certainly have a moment of silence at the end of the meeting. Moving on now to member Ken Monning.
Well, thanks to my fellow board members for their thoughtful comments today. And to Chair and now President-elect Block, congratulations. And I appreciate your willingness to take on that additional role. I have a brief report today, just to say that I've had the opportunity in the past month to meet with Chair Kutry a few times on the theme of language access at CUIAB. And after hearing public comment last month from Attorney George Warner of Legal Aid at Work, I want to thank Chief Kutry for personally following up with him directly to discuss the language access issues that were raised. And so in Chief Kutry's report today, he's going to share some details and metrics on language access at CUIAB based on some of the discussions we had and some research that he did. So I just want to thank him for the time that he spent on those themes, which are really important issues. So thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Okay, that concludes the reports of our board members. Item 5 on our agenda is public comment. Now we'll double check with the moderator. Do we have members of the public who wish to comment?
Chair Block, I do have a public member with their hand raised.
Okay. Before we go to public comment, then let me briefly state the ground rules as I do every month. Each member of the public who wishes to address the board has up to 5 minutes. I will set a timer. You have up to 5 minutes to say what you want about any item related to board's business. This is, however, just comment. It is you telling the board how you feel about an issue. It is not a dialogue. Board members will not respond to questions, will not ask questions. We will just listen. After the comment is finished, as appropriate, there may be follow-up from staff, not during the meeting, but at a later date. One other comment, if you're calling with comments regarding EDD, we are not EDD. Some people do confuse our role. While we hear appeals of EDD determinations, we can't move cases for EDD. We can't respond to EDD questions. So if you have an EDD question, I mean, you have a right to make a public comment, but this is not probably the proper forum. Having said that, let's go ahead with the first public commenter.
Chair Block, I'm admitting R. Miller for public comment. R. Miller, you may state your name and begin.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Well, you've heard me before, and I'm here to let you know that since I asked Chair Block last year to investigate my continued denial of reemployment, I've still not received a full, fair investigation report that I was promised. As you know, I've been a former ALJ 1 and 2 with the CUIAB. I passed every merit selection or merit salary adjustment. I passed probation as a 1 and passed probation as a 2, and conducted a full-time schedule for several years for the CUIAB, hearing advanced caseloads of 28 cases or more per week for several years. So I've done a lot of work with CUIAB. I've not had anything negative in my file as an ALJ2, working under Judge Harold Rutger, who is retired following a heart transplant. I also worked briefly under another judge who's transferred to Oakland. I never worked directly under Judge Kutry as a PJ in San Diego. I currently, and have been since 2017, on the eligibility reemployment list as an ALJ2 for the CUIAB. However, although I've applied for every opening, I still have not been even given the consideration of an interview. I continue to be concerned since I tried to correspond with Rob Silva and received platitudes, but never any indication that I was in any way unqualified to be reemployed as an ALJ2. I've sent each of you a copy of my current eligibility and invite each of you to review anything in my official personnel file to see if there's anything negative. And again, I've asked Chair Block to please give me the results of his investigation. So far, I've received nothing but silence from the CUIAB board and a brief letter from Chief Counsel Wu Sam stating that I wasn't reemployed because of my work performance while at the CUIAB. He didn't say what it was, and there's nothing in my file to indicate that. So again, after year, I'm asking for investigation by the board. Chair Block has promised me an investigation. I've heard Member Allen state several times that he has some familiarity with HR. I invite him to review my eligibility. I invite him to review every one of my applications. I invite him to review Cal HR and State Board personnel manuals and policies concerning reemployment, and please reply. At this point, I filed an appeal, so to speak, with each one of you and have never received a decision. I have nothing except silence. I can't even object to what you said because you haven't said anything. You're judges, you're supposed to look at the examine the evidence, make a decision, and provide that decision to the applicant. You do that every day. I'm in front of you. I came to the board because I'm supposed to start with the board when something is amiss, and such as my reemployment. I've come to the board and not received any kind of a definitive response or decision that I can even appeal from. I think it's incredibly unfair and I'm concerned about the ethics that each of you have as judges, the responsibility that each of you have as the leaders of the CUIAB. Chair Block has been lauded as exemplary and doing a good job. However, this is still hopefully on his bucket list that will be fulfilled. I'm in limbo with the lack of response despite numerous replies or applications and submissions to you as a board. Please, Member Allen, put on your HR hat and look at what I sent you. Look at the laws that you're held to obey and follow as board members. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Is there anyone else who has comment?
We have no other hands raised for public comment, Chair Block.
Okay, thank you. No other hands are raised. Then we will move on from item 5, public comment, to item number 6, a report by our Chief Judge, Executive Director, Mike Kutry.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Block and board members. Congratulations, Chair Block, on your NOWAP appointment as President and President-elect. As we well know, NOWAP is in good hands. Thank you, Member Allen, also for your reminder about the hardship and losses that we as a nation and world have experienced, including those touching our CUIAB family. I will begin with a review of CUIAB's workload and timeliness, and then move on to other operational issues. August was the second consecutive month that overnight appeal transmittals from the department returned to relative normal pre-pandemic levels. Overnight transmittals through August were only 13% higher than our last pre-pandemic month in March of 2020. We continue to meet regularly with the EDD to forecast future workload to see if those trends might change. We are now 5 months into the Department of Labor evaluation year. All timeliness measures continue to lag behind DOL guidelines, but 30 and 45-day timeliness continue to track the national average for the evaluation year. The vast majority of states, including California, are focusing their efforts on resolving the oldest appeals first, after the crushing workload of 2020 and early 2021. Our effort to process the oldest cases first is reflected in the average case age compared to national numbers. We are at 99 days, and we continue to exceed the national case average of 128 days. As month-over-month appeal transmittals are finally in decline, we are staying the course on recruitment and training of new judges and staff. The latest round of hiring is concluding, and Presiding Judge Bach has trained the new cohort of 11 judges, all of whom return to the field this week to contribute immediately. The training of the next group of new judges begins the first week in October. Similar to July, judges and staff decided and issued over 28,000 appeal decisions in August. We utilized increased assigned caseloads, team calendars, volunteers for extra cases, and pop-up events for identity appeals. On the issue of the identity pop-up events, since we first started reporting on that possibility in June, we've resolved an additional 1,500 cases by that same fashion. We use invitation appointments to field offices to present identity documents in person. A big thank you to the San Diego office for expanding the pilot and helping create the blueprint for further expansion. The Delta variant has forced us to roll out cautiously, but we continue to see mild improvements in public health conditions, and this will afford us more latitude for additional expansion in other jurisdictions. Our field operations continue to operate with impacts from the COVID-19 pandemic. The Fresno office closed in the last couple of weeks for one day due to a positive test, but has since reopened without any community spread. Significantly, in late July, CalHR implemented vaccine verification and testing protocols for all state employees. In that first phase, all state agencies were required to verify vaccination status for their employees. I'm pleased to report that as of today, the CUIAB has verified a more than 80% vaccination rate in its employees, a full 10% increase from our initial reporting on August 3rd. In the next phase, those employees who have not yet verified vaccination status will be required to be tested for COVID-19 weekly. The CUIAB has received supplies to begin testing and is awaiting final details for the weekly testing to begin. As you all know, we have been operating under an executive order since last year that suspended the right to in-person participations to the public and parties in our facilities. That order is scheduled to expire at the end of the month, and without additional extension will do so. We are waiting for any developments and direction from the state on this issue, and out of an abundance of caution, we've reached out to the impacted employee representatives to discuss any future protocols. As Member Kent Monning alluded to, Mr. Warner from Legal Aid at Work contacted the board during the last meeting to express some concern over language access issues. I reached out to him after the meeting and we spoke in an effort to share feedback on how we might improve our language access to those who require assistance. And I look forward to continuing feedback from this stakeholder and others as we move forward. With Mr. Werner's permission, we were able to confirm that CUIAB afforded the requested language support from the time of CUIAB's receipt of the appeal and through the hearing. But we were happy to accept feedback on some things that we might be able to improve in future processes. So I would like to thank Mr. Warner for spending valuable time with me on this important issue. Member Kent Monning and I also reviewed some of the compliance issues connected to the state's language services provisions, as well as the depth of services that CUIAB is able to provide to parties who request language assistance. As Chief Silva reported earlier this year, the CUIAB was in compliance with the state's language services requirements in its biannual audit in 2020 and will be subject to the same audit again in 2022. Now, our work on language access begins when an appeal is identified by the department as requiring language assistance, or when a party requests assistance directly to us for the first time. We boast a live, ample telephonic access to all parties that has remained uninterrupted throughout the pandemic. Once connected to a CUIAB field office, the public can utilize our internal resources as much as possible for prompt language access service. To that end, we have 43 bilingual staff who are authorized to assist in 6 languages: Spanish, Cantonese, Vietnamese, Mandarin, Tagalog, and Armenian. Each office maintains a directory of those staff for conference calls with contacting parties, so that any staff or judge can connect for a conference call in the requested language. Any languages beyond those captured by our internal resources are connected with an interpreter service that provides real-time language support in over 350 languages. Last but certainly not least, CUIAB has a core of dedicated judges with bilingual skills. While not counted among the 43 staff previously mentioned, our judges routinely offer substantial assistance in language other than English to parties seeking assistance with decision explanation, hearing procedures, or other special administrative requests. We're grateful for that help. We welcome feedback from parties and other stakeholders as we continually assess our access to services for all Californians, and we look forward to expanded resources being available with increased modernization. So I look forward to participation in the board in these endeavors. And thank you, Member Kent Monning, for taking the time to discuss these with me, and to Mr. Warner for expressing his concerns. I usually conclude with a security brief. Unfortunately, there were 2 events to report since the last meeting. The Pasadena office experienced an individual trying to force their way into the building. CHP was contacted, responded, and the event has not repeated. Second, CUIAB has begun receiving unsolicited, broadly distributed emails containing implied threats to EDD. The matter has been directed to CHP, and it is coordinating with EDD's security efforts in that regard. That concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mike. We'll go around now with any questions or comments, beginning with Vice Chair Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mike, for that presentation. First, I want to thank you for your creative workarounds, particularly on the pop-up events. As you know, the identity cases are a large share of our overall workload. I'd also like to thank you for working with Board Member Kent Monning on the language access issues, which is an incredibly important issue here in California, given the multitude of diverse languages that are spoken here. And I'd also like to thank Ms. Bach for her quick work training up and doing such a great job training up the new ALJs to help us tackle this workload. I do have a couple questions in that you said that, I thought I heard you say that the right to an in-person hearing has been suspended, but unless extended will expire at the end of this month, which is next week. Have you prepared, or what steps have you taken to prepare for in-person hearings resuming? And can you outline for me exactly how do claimants elect for an in-person hearing? Is that the default? Do they have to firmly say, no, I don't want a phone hearing, I want an in-person hearing? How's that process work? If you could outline for me, that'd be great.
Yeah, pre-pandemic, yes, that was the default, except in a certain amount of cases that were located a distance from the nearest hearing facility, or could be moved to an office to have a quicker hearing because of another office's backlog. The default here will probably transition slowly because of public health concerns. Our experience has been that the vast majority of parties would prefer currently to appear by phone. So we will likely continue to do that to set a large majority of cases by phone. And any individual who wishes to request an appearance in person may do so, which we will then accommodate. We just don't know yet what the frequency of that request will be. We're working with a number of other administrative agencies under the labor agency's umbrella to determine how it is that they plan to go back to in-person hearings. So if the executive order expires, we're gathering a database of protocols. We expect that likely the first in-person hearings would not occur until late October because of how far out we're scheduled. But we have to meet with the labor representatives and with guidance from the labor agency to determine statewide protocols for in-person hearings.
But we are now essentially going to be telling people they have a right to an in-person hearing if they so choose, and that'll be clear in the documents they get.
Yes, we have to prepare that messaging. That's not part of our, because we've never operated under this model, that's not part of our current messaging. So we need to prepare that. We're working every day towards this eventuality. We won't know probably until the eve of the event whether it will go forward or not.
Assuming we start getting in-person hearings trickling in at the end of October, you feel confident that your staff and prepared to handle that in-person workload?
I do. All offices have been briefed all along. We're preparing protocols, gathering the resources we need to open safely. It will take a bit of workup. We've been closed since March of 2020, and we've not, for the large part, had any public in our waiting rooms or in our hearing rooms. So there are obvious health and safety concerns from staff and judges who will be on the front line of this effort, and we're working as hard as we can to secure filtration, personal protective equipment, and protocols that we can use to keep everyone safe.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dan. Moving on now to Member Ang.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd also like to echo thanks to Member Kent Monning for pursuing the language access issue. As you know, we've had that discussion many times coming from the immigration experiences that we both share. I wanted to thank Michael Kutry for taking the time again for the briefings between the meetings, and also for making those flights around the CUIAB circuit to visit our various offices during a time of great challenge at the airports and the airline flights, et cetera, COVID-19. Following up with the language access issue, I wanted to know, and I'm glad to know that we're continuing to make it better. I wanted to know, is there a protocol other than the surveys that have been reported out to us, I believe, by Mr. Silva? Is there a protocol where during a hearing, a claimant has difficulty and challenges with the translation? Secondly, where often during an appeal, or sometimes we receive a statement in the appeal that the claimant has had trouble making themselves known, either through translation or otherwise. And also when board members review the hearings, and also the field and the appellate judges hear the hearings in which there appears to be challenges. Are there any protocols for reviewing the quality of the translation, or is that left up to the surveys at the end of the year or periodic?
No, I'm sorry, that's a separate process. So we have a language access team that reviews all complaints, whether it arises from a party who's had an adverse experience by calling in, or has a complaint about the quality of the materials or interpreting services that are rendered. So we have liaisons with all of the agencies and all of the staffing personnel at the agencies to discuss concerns, to have them reviewed by another professional interpreter. And the same goes for our internal folks. If somebody complains about the quality of the interpreting services, we reach out to a professional interpreter and have it reviewed. And so the quality of the interpreting is subject to constant review, and we do that regularly. So I hope that answered your question. If there are any concerns about a specific hearing, those can be directed to me through a referral, and then I will take it to the language team and review it.
Well, no, thank you for the explanation. So I just want to clarify. So does there have to be an active complaint filed by a judge or a panel member, claimant, employer, or does someone actually review, say, do a spot check of hearings, or review the appeals for wording in which there are those challenges? And I just want to know is it a wait and see if there's a complaint, or is it some kind of or something else?
We do have periodic reviews, but I'd be hesitant to explain the frequency and the depth of those without researching it further, but I can certainly get that information to you.
Okay, so if a panel member, one of our 5-member panelists, review a case and see that there are difficulties, what do we do about that?
So those should go to the executive office with a referral. And that's a simple process. We receive those from time to time. And other issues, those can be included in those referrals to me. And so I will, if it's a language issue, I'll take it to our language access team and have them run through their protocols with it. But if it's obviously one of the other realms, then I would handle it individually.
Okay, I would appreciate if perhaps you, and thank you, you've answered the question completely. I was wondering if you could send a memo to the board members to indicate what you just said and either the phone number or the email and what information is needed if we should have an issue. Finally, I wanted to, just a continuing question. I remember at some point we were going to get the appeals directly when they were filed at the same time as EDD, and that was going to be a little bit of a game changer. Has that process started yet, or are we still waiting for it to occur?
Yes, the process has started. So we are we've submitted our regulations packet to labor agency, and now it's the ball's in their court to go through and discover any adverse impacts it may have up and down the stream of work. So we meet with them regularly to address any concerns, and it is still under review at the department, at the labor agency, excuse me.
But in actuality, does it mean that we get the cases quicker as opposed to going through EDD, sending them to us?
So maybe I can jump in here because I think there's a misunderstanding. The process of a decision being made has begun, and it is in process with labor agency making that determination. The process of actually getting the cases directly has not begun. In fact, that decision hasn't been made yet. We're waiting on labor agency through no fault of our own.
Okay, yeah, no, that's what that was, thank you for, and I'll continuing to ask that question because I do think it will be a game changer. I have no further questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Kutry.
Thank you, Member.
Thank you, Mike. Member Allen.
Excuse me, I have to unmute myself. So I really don't have a question for the Chief Judge, but I do have a couple of comments. And one of them is that I'm aware of through reading the Sacramento Bee and other newspapers that there's a large package of legislation going to the governor's desk that would affect EDD. Of course, we're a separate agency, but I'm just assuming, but I never assume, I ask, is that if there's changes to procedures and policies within EDD that affect our agency, which is a separate entity, or other agencies, that is looked at the time of this going through for impacts that may affect us. I would note there is one piece of legislation would greatly enhance our ability to at least EDDs to have more access to more resources regarding language and cultural issues, which is a good thing. So I'm not going to assume, I'm going to ask you if that's the case.
I am aware that a significant portion of the fix-it bills going through directed at EDD do include language access. So I would expect that to be a highlighted item going forward that probably will make its way through the passage process. There are a number of other upgrades to their systems and to pre-appeal review rights that I'm not qualified to speak on, but I'm generally aware of. So to the extent that those do make it through the legislative process, we will, of course, analyze its impacts, if any, on CUIAB. But we are hopeful that any improvements at the EDD side trickle through to CUIAB because these are all public service components. So we hope that the smoother things go over there, the smoother they will go here as well.
I guess this question I would have, because it doesn't involve the legislation package, but just our workflow. Has there been much discussion between our agency and EDD regarding these large tranches that come over of cases all at once rather than a more steady flow of cases?
Yes, we've established regular communications. We meet at least monthly to talk about that very issue. What is the EDD expending its resources on that may end up in appeals? So we have finally a very good pipeline of information coming over. We were informed that it seems unlikely that a large volume will come over in a short amount of time, but it will be a prolonged effort. There are several items of deferred workload at the EDD side that some may take years to reach us. So those are the discussions we're having for future planning.
Thank you. And my last comment is directed to Board Member Eng and Board Member Kent Monning. It is appreciated your efforts to look at these cultural and language issues. And I so appreciate that we have board members who have some background in immigration law. I find it extremely valuable for our work. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Moving on now to Member Kent Monning.
Just want to thank you, Chief Kutry, for taking the time to meet with me, and then obviously a lot of time digging into the nuts and bolts of language access. And it's pretty clear that CUIAB takes it very seriously, and it is something that we're always working on improving. So that is very much appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Laura, and thank you, Chief Judge Kutry, for your report. Moving on now to presiding ALJ Jody Remke from our appellate operations. Jody.
Good afternoon, Chair Block and board members. I'll be going over the August 2021 key performance indicators. I'm pleased to announce that the board's numbers have continued to improve since last month as far as time lapse goes. For the percent of cases closed in 45 days or less, we had 79.8% in August, and those closed in 75 days or less, we were at 94.1%. So again, going strong there.
And Jody, for those who may be watching, that's our closure percentage compared to what is the standard?
The standard for the 45 days or less is the guideline is 50% of the cases. And again, we are at 79.8. For those closed in 75 days or less, the standard is 80% of the cases or more, and we were at 94.1. So we beat both of the standards there. And then again, if you look at the average days to close appeals, I'm pleased to show that we have on the UI time-lapse appeals, we're down to 44 days of average. Last month, we were up to 67 days. So overall, again, we're still holding strong at the board. And as we've discussed in previous months, that's just because of a lower case number than the field is getting. So we are able to continue to handle it at our current staffing and board member composition. Thank you.
Thank you, Jody. Questions or comments for AO presiding Judge Remke? First, we move Vice Chair Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I don't have any questions. Thank you, Jody.
Thank you, Dan. Member Eng.
Yes, Judge Remke, just again, a shout out for transitioning us from pre-pandemic to pandemic benefit cases. I found the trainings and the help on the discussion page to be extremely helpful. And I guess now we're going to be going back to hopefully post-pandemic normalcy. But I just wanted to tell you how much they.
I wouldn't think that's going to happen too quickly, though. I think.
Yeah, I'm going to
cases to get through first.
Yeah, and I know there are cases in the pipeline, so I'm not going to get rid of the 100 pounds of additional documents and folders that I have. But I just wanted to let you know. I was reminded when I saw the EDD memo stating the end of the federal benefits cases, but yet the existing number of programs that claimants can also qualify for. I just wanted to reiterate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Moving to Member Allen.
Yes, Judge Repke, you're appreciated. I hope you know that. And, I do appreciate the fact that you really are good at sharing the memos about points of law or procedure that is given to the AO judges, that we have knowledge of those so that we can all stay on the same page and understand some of the underlying issues that we should be aware of. So thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Moving now to Member Ken Monning.
No questions, but just thank you, Judge Remke, for always being available for our questions related to cases. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course.
Okay, thank you, Laura, and thank you, Judge Remke, for your report. Moving on now to our Chief Information Officer, Jeff Wilby.
Good afternoon, Chair Block and members of the board. I am pleased to report that we have completed the 8th sprint in our modernization project We're readying ourselves for Sprint 9, and staff continue to work really hard on best practices and options for core tools like the public portal and things like decision dictation. So we're very pleased with that. Regarding the online check-in effort that we recently started to launch statewide, I've been personally working with presiding judges throughout the state and staff to implement it. And I'm really pleased to inform you that the check-in site has been hit more than 1,000 times in the last month. So a goodly portion of those are people checking in for their hearings, which is great. I will admit that a small fraction of them are us because we're curious. So that is really great. As we get more hearing notices out with the instructions on how to check in online, we should see that number dramatically increase. And I'll continue to keep the board updated on progress in that way. And my final item for this month, of course, I would be remiss if I didn't remind the organization that October is just around the corner, and it is National Cybersecurity Month. You're aware that we do invest and implement security tools, but they're only half of the equation. As I do every year, I'll remind everyone watching to do your part and be cyber smart. And I'm really working on getting a different jingle together to go with that, because it does rhyme, but it's kind of silly. So as more of our time is spent online, bad actors continue to look for more and more sophisticated ways to get information from us and gain access to information using very convincing techniques. So I just wanted to remind everyone that your diligence keeps the folks who we serve, their information safe. So continue to be cyber smart. And that's my report for this month. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jefferson. Questions or comments, Vice Chair Reeves?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Jefferson, for the reminder about cybersecurity. I now feel like my password is as long as Moby Dick. But I do take your caution into consideration every time I get an email on my web server, and I'm afraid to open anything from anyone practically. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Dan. Moving on, Member Eng.
Nothing spectacular other than thank you so much, Chief Wilby. The fact that I have not had any tech challenges is a testament to how well the system has worked, for me at least.
Good.
I think the lack of tech challenges is pretty spectacular. So
I'm very happy.
okay, move on to Member Allen.
No questions other than a thank you for your work, Jefferson. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And moving now to Member Kemani.
No questions, just also thank you. And thanks to members of the IT team who helped me smoothly get onto a new laptop this past month. So that's always appreciated. It takes some time, and everyone is so generous with their time and patience. So thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Jefferson, for that report. We move on to item 9 on our agenda, our final report by Rob Silva, our Chief of Administrative Services. Rob.
Thank you, Chair Block. Good afternoon, board members. A brief report. I will start with our hiring efforts. As we've discussed before, on August 27th, Judge Bach conducted cohort number 8 for 11 incoming administrative law judges. I've heard great things about that training, excuse me. We now have start dates for 3 more ALJs, and we're in the name clearance process for an additional 3. So if those 3 are cleared and accept, we will have 6 new ALJs scheduled for the next cohort, which is October 8th. And that would total 17 new administrative law judges to our field operations for this particular recruitment. I have a support staff update as well. Since the last board meeting, we've actually hired 9 new support staff in field operations. We currently have 19 that are pending. Of those 19, 12 are in the interview phase of the recruitment, and the other 7 have had very recent final filing dates within the last 2 or 3 weeks. As Chief Kutry alluded to, we're about to embark on COVID-19 testing. CalHR announced that state departments are partnering with the California Department of Public Health's testing task force to set up ongoing testing for employees that have not provided proof of COVID-19 vaccination. I've been working with CDPH over the last couple of weeks to get them the data that they need from us, such as how many employees per site need to be tested each week and who will act as the site leads for our field operations offices for this effort. As mentioned already, some test kits have already arrived, and I specifically am in the process of working out some of the mechanics with CDPH, and we plan to have the program up and running within the next couple of weeks. Because CUIAB has less than 20 employees per site that will need to be tested, we have qualified to have those employees self-test at home. The tests that will be utilized will be the Abbott rapid antigen tests that are really easy to use, and they provide results after 15 minutes of the test taken. I have a quick procurement update. Obviously, with the board adopting the 2021-22 budget last month, we are now starting work on the facility upgrades to our Bay Area Office of Appeals in Oakland, as well as the smaller scale projects we have in Pasadena, San Jose, and the Sacramento Offices of Appeals. And also our statewide replacement postage machines are expected to arrive in the respective offices over the next 2 weeks. Lastly, on open enrollment, last week, we alerted all employees to CalHR's, they did a virtual open enrollment fair for health benefits this year. It was held on September 15th. For those employees not able to attend during lunch on that particular day, we let everyone know that it would be available on demand through their website until October 15th. We subsequently distributed open enrollment information to all employees late last week, announcing the open enrollment period that started this last Monday, September 20th, and it will run through October 15th. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Rob. We'll now take questions or comments for Chief Administrative Services, Rob Silva, beginning with Vice Chair Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Rob, for that presentation. Just so I'm clear on the process, you're partnering with the Department of Public Health on testing for those unvaccinated employees. And we have testing kits that the employees can take home and test at home. So how mechanically does that work? We hand them the kit, they go home, they test, and they have to produce a negative test every week in order to keep coming to the workplace?
That is correct. We haven't determined yet a specific day of the week. It most likely will be Mondays for an employee to self-test. Mechanically, the way the self-test works, they would do it in the privacy of their own home if they wish. Once presumably the negative result is attained, they will go into a CDPH partnered website with which they've already created an online presence. They'll have to go in and register first. Then they will they certify that they are submitting results of a negative test, and they would do that every week. The difference would be if an employees, we do have some employees that intermittently report to work. Let's say they come every other Tuesday to work. They're partially teleworking. Then on the day that they would be expected to report to work, that's the day they would take that weekly test. And to answer the first part of your question, yes, the site leads, which for now are the presiding administrative law judges and a couple other different classifications within Venture Oaks, would simply hand the kits to the employees for their use.
Just for sake of curiosity, what happens if the employee fails to produce that negative test?
Is the question if the test results are positive?
No, if they just don't do it?
Well, they are required to do it. So then we have to, it is a requirement by the state, so we have to get into progressive discipline at that time.
So it's not a function of they just work from home if they so choose?
I'm sorry, I misunderstood the
So
question.
I guess my point is that if they opt not to test, they don't have the option of simply working from home.
In the situation in which their typical work schedule is not 100% teleworking, that is correct. They don't have that option
Okay.
to just simply say, and I now 100% telework.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Dan. Moving to member Eng.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Chief Silva, I know that the protocols keep changing and they're according to various jurisdictions. Can you just refresh my memory in terms of what our requirements are? So every state worker has to be vaccinated except for those with exemptions. And if they receive an exemption, they can opt to be tested prior to some period of working. Did I state that incorrectly?
The way it works is employees must provide proof of vaccination, of which, as Chief Kuchar reported, we're now up to 80% reported vaccinated. I'll say 80.1, because why leave out the 0.1? And short of providing that proof, if they are reporting to the office, they must weekly test, take the COVID-19 test before reporting to the office.
Oh, so there is no exception. In other words, they don't have to, in order to qualify for the test, they don't have to say that they're exempt from the vaccination. In other words, if they feel they're exempt for any reason, or they choose not to be vaccinated, no proof is asked for other than the test. Is that correct?
Correct. We need to have them test weekly. If they're wanting to request an exemption from the testing process and protocol, that would be something we would have to handle through our reasonable accommodation process on an individual basis.
Okay, and is it known at this point what percentage of our workforce has decided not to become vaccinated for any reason?
Well, the only percentage I can speak to is the ones that have not provided proof of vaccination. And that's at roughly 20%.
20%, okay. All right, and finally, the issue of privacy or non-privacy, is the information about those that have been not vaccinated, but rather tested, is that information made available to the other employees at the site where the unvaccinated person will be working?
The testing information should not be made, should not be given to any other employee other than the specific employee itself. When they do self-test at home and they upload the results into the system, there's a few boxes they have to check, and one of them is a HIPAA-related box that they have to check to basically, they're letting people, the CDPH, access the negative test records. But other employees should, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you, go ahead.
No, there's no reason that other employees should be aware of specific tests being circulated to those who have yet to provide proof of vaccination.
Well, maybe I can make it very specific. So let's just say that I go to work every day and someone that I knowingly would come in contact with, do I have the ability to know whether that person is not vaccinated? Not that they've been tested, but that they're not vaccinated.
You do not have the ability to know, other than in certain counties within California, if a mask mandate in the workplace is not in place. Let's say you can, as a vaccinated employee, go to the workplace without being masked, and a person without providing proof of vaccination must still wear a mask in the workplace. Does that make sense?
In our workplaces, we require everyone to wear a mask regardless of vaccination?
I'm trying to think if there's been a recent change in some counties. I realize in Sacramento, LA County, Bay Area counties, there's a mask mandate in the workplace, whether vaccinated or not. But I will have to look and see if places like Fresno, California, or Inland Empire have those mandates. They may have, and I've just simply forgotten, but I can check into that.
Well, no, I'm just curious. So we don't, our employees, including ourselves, we don't follow a state mandate. We can opt to follow the county mandate.
If there's no state mandate in place, the county mandate would prevail.
Well, that's what I'm asking. Isn't there a state mandate for all state employees?
For masks in the workplace?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I'll look into it. I honestly, it's changed so often over the last 8 weeks, 9 weeks that it may be in place, and I'm just forgetting as we speak now.
Okay, yeah, that's important to know because, as you know, people are in a situation where they don't wear masks, obviously, when they consume food, et cetera, et cetera. So
Sure.
it would be good to know what mandates our employees and ourselves are under at this particular time, in history. Thank you. Sorry for
Yeah, I'll
Thank
research
you,
this
Mike.
afternoon.
sorry for so many
Moving on to
questions.
member Ellen.
Hi, Rob. Just a couple of questions. So with these mandates regarding testing and the various procedures for the pandemic for the workforce, was this negotiated by HR, Cal HR, with all the employee organizations of the state en masse to get a conforming kind of procedure? Or it's a compound question, or is this the kind of thing where we are obligated, or have we received requests from the employee organizations to negotiate regarding these procedures?
I don't mean to put Mr. Wusam on the spot, but he may be better to answer that question if he wouldn't mind, because I'm sure was involved with that with Kim Hickox.
Yes, I'd be happy to answer that. The state provided notice to all of the employee organizations that it would be implementing this testing requirement. And there have been grievances filed by SEIU with PERB over that, and that's still pending at this time. Contemporaneously, the state instructed all of the departments to provide, to implement the testing requirement and to provide unit notice. CUIAB did do that with the bargaining units that it employs. And at this time, we have not received a request from any of our employee organizations to meet and confer on the testing requirements.
I asked the question because there's a wage and hour implications for some of these issues that we were discussing, and also health and safety. So, I guess my personal druthers is that rather than waiting for individual grievances, communication with the employee organizations might be advisable. At least that's my suggestion, but that's up to the wisdom of our chief counsel and management. But I believe in these sort of things that rather than waiting for the shoe to drop, sometimes it's better to reach out and find out if there's overarching concerns that will create grievances for the staff and for management. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Moving to member Ken Monning.
Thank you, Chief Silva. Just one question. I'm wondering if there have been procurement challenges for you to get the AVID tests in the quantities that you hope to get, or if the state's helping with that. I know there's been challenges with various entities, schools, for example. So I was just curious about that.
There haven't been initial challenges. All of our site leads have been already sent the initial packages, save for one, and I'm not sure why they didn't show up, but we have enough to cover that. There is an immediate challenge in that I'm trying to work out with CDPH how to order more kits as needed, because their website is a little bit misleading with regard to paying for the kits and how shipping is paid for. They've been talking about having departments pay for shipping and have FEMA eventually reimburse for the shipping. So there's just a couple of those. I mean, I think they're really simple wrinkles that will be worked out in the coming week. But after those are dealt with, I really don't see that. They haven't advertised that there would be any problems with regards to obtaining them or shortages or anything like that. Just an initial mechanics issue.
Thank you. That's good news.
Okay, thank you, Laura, and thank you, Rob, for your report. As indicated earlier, there's no closed session this week or this month. However, as was requested by Member Allen, without objection, we will observe a moment of silence for those who have perished due to the COVID pandemic. So please, with me now, a moment of silence. Okay, thank you all. Thank you all for this meeting, and we will now stand adjourned. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, folks. Have a great day.
Thank you,
Right.
Mr. Chair.